How does a Japanese company famous for making practical grocery getters and reliable lawnmowers absolutely humiliate the untouchable Italian royalty at Ferrari? I mean, it sounds like a bad joke, right? But in the 1990s, that is exactly what Honda did. A lot of supercar history is just rich guys in expensive suits pretending their exotic cars aren't constantly catching on fire. But today, we are looking deeper into the ultimate automotive underdog story. We are unpacking the sheer genius of the VTEC engine and answering the question, how did an everyday car maker build a machine so flawless it forced the most arrogant brands on earth to completely panic? Let's go back to the 1980s. Ferrari was the undisputed, untouchable king of the supercar world. But let's be entirely honest with ourselves for a second. Driving a 1980s Ferrari was basically being in a toxic relationship. You paid an absolute fortune for a car that had a clutch pedal heavier than a bank vault. The AC was merely a suggestion, and if you needed to change a simple timing belt, the mechanic had to literally take the entire engine out of the car. It was financial and physical torture. But rich people just put up with it. Why? Because it had a little prancing horse on the steering wheel, and it made you feel like European royalty. Cut across the world to Japan. What was Honda doing? They were making the Civic. Good, honest, sensible cars that your grandmother would use to go buy groceries. If Ferrari was an Italian supermodel who screamed at you and threw plates, Honda was the reliable accountant who always remembered your birthday and helped you with your taxes. So, when the European automotive press heard a rumor that Honda, the economy car people, wanted to build a mid-engine supercar to directly hunt down the Ferrari 328 and 348, they laughed out loud. They literally thought it was a translation error. They were like, oh, how cute, the lawnmower guys want to play with the big boys. But here is the massive detail the arrogant Europeans conveniently forgot. While Honda was selling sensible, fuel-efficient sedans on Monday, they were committing absolute murder on the Formula One racetracks on Sunday. In the late 80s, Honda was building engines for the McLaren F1 team. And by building engines, I mean they were constructing weapons of mass destruction. In 1988, they won 15 out of 16 races in a single season. That's not a winning streak, guys. That's a monopoly. They were actively bullying the European racing elite in their own backyard. So Honda wasn't just daydreaming. They looked at Ferrari's arrogant business model and said, you know what? We are going to build a supercar that is faster than yours. We are going to make it handle better than yours. It's going to cost nearly half the price. And prepare yourselves for this dark magic. The air conditioning will actually blow cold air, and the car will start every single morning. They wanted to build a daily drivable supercar that didn't spontaneously combust on the way to the golf course. The NSX project was officially born. To understand how Honda pulled this off, you have to understand a fundamental problem in automotive physics. Designing an engine is basically a massive compromise. If you want a car that is smooth, quiet, and doesn't stall when you're looking for parking at Trader Joe's, it's not going to be very fast. But if you want a screaming, high-revving track monster, it is going to idle like a washing machine full of bricks at a red light. You see, Ferrari's solution to this was simple. We are Italian. We only care about going fast. If the car shakes your teeth out at a stop sign, that is passione. But Honda couldn't do that. They had a reputation to protect. So, Honda's head of R&D walked up to his lead engineer, a guy named Ikuo Kajitani, and gave him an impossible task. I want a naturally aspirated engine that makes 100 horsepower per litre, which is basically race car territory. But I also want my grandmother to be able to drive it to church. Kajitani must have looked at him like he was asking for a vegan steak. It physically didn't make sense. But as with all great human discoveries, the breakthrough didn't happen in a sterile laboratory. It happened at a bar. Kajitani was at an izakaya, drinking and eating yakitori. You know, the Japanese grilled chicken skewers. He's staring at the meat spinning on the bamboo stick, and suddenly, his brain just connects the dots. He realizes a camshaft in an engine is essentially just a metal skewer. What if, instead of having just one shape of meat on the skewer, we put a different, bigger piece of meat right next to it. Let me explain this without giving you an engineering degree. They created a system where the engine physically changes its own shape while you are driving. For normal, everyday driving, the engine uses a small, gentle cam profile. The car is polite. It says good morning, it does its taxes, it behaves like a standard Honda Civic. But the second you press the accelerator and the engine hits 5,500 RPM, boom, oil pressure fires a tiny metal pin, locking in a completely different, much more aggressive cam profile. The engine sound instantly changes from a polite purr to a screaming banshee. It's like Bruce Banner ripping his shirt and turning into the Incredible Hulk, completely on command. This was VTEC, variable valve timing and lift electronic control. It was quite literally two completely different engines living in the exact same apartment. But Honda engineers are absolute psychopaths when it comes to reliability. To prove to themselves that this incredibly complex, high RPM switching mechanism wouldn't just shatter into a million pieces, they put the engine on a test rig and redlined it to 8,000 RPM. Then, they made the VTEC system switch on and off continuously, 400,000 times, without a single failure. So now Honda has this absolute masterpiece of an engine. But you can't just drop a masterpiece engine into a heavy, boring steel box and call it a Ferrari killer. You need a body that matches the heart. At the time, everyone was making cars out of steel. But Honda looked at fighter jets and thought, why don't we just make the whole thing out of aluminum? And they did. They created the world's first all-aluminum production monocoque chassis. It was incredibly light, incredibly advanced, and the Honda executives were standing around looking at their prototype like extremely proud parents at a middle school science fair. They thought they had just solved the universe. But to be absolutely sure, they needed a second opinion. And when you are Honda in the late 80s, you don't just ask some random guy with a clipboard. You call up the god of motorsport, Formula One legend, Ayrton Senna. They bring Senna to the Suzuka circuit in Japan. The engineers are practically vibrating with excitement. They give him the keys to the NSX prototype, expecting him to do a few laps, get out of the car, weep tears of joy, and declare it the greatest machine ever created by human hands. Senna pushes the car to the absolute limit. He pulls back into the pit lane, steps out, looks at these hopeful Japanese engineers, and essentially says, yeah, it's pretty good, but I feel it's a little fragile. A little fragile. Can you imagine the heartbreak? That is the equivalent of Gordon Ramsay coming to your house, tasting your grandmother's secret family recipe, and saying, it tastes like sadness. It is a devastating blow. Now, almost any other car company in the world would have said, listen, Ayrton is a Formula One driver. His standards are ridiculous. The car is fine for dentists and bankers. Just put it in the showrooms. But not Honda. They took Senna's words so personally that they basically threw a tantrum, packed up the entire prototype, and shipped it to Germany to the Nürburgring, the most dangerous, grueling racetrack on Earth. They spent months completely redesigning the structural geometry of the car. They tested it, broke it, and tested it again, until they managed to increase the chassis rigidity by a massive 50%. 50%! Just because one Brazilian guy said it felt a bit wobbly. Because of Senna's brutal honesty, the NSX was no longer just a clever science experiment. It was forged in fire. It now had the perfect, rigid, lightweight body to match its invincible VTEC heart. In 1990, Honda finally unleashed the NSX onto the world. The price tag? About $60,000, which was roughly 60% of what Ferrari was charging for their brand new 348. I imagine Ferrari executives in Maranello were violently choking on their morning espresso, but they probably brushed it off. Hey, it's a Honda. It's a budget car. Who cares? Well, then the automotive journalists got their hands on it, and they took the NSX to the track. The NSX didn't just beat the Ferrari 348. It completely pantsed it in front of the entire school. Here was a 3.0-litre V6 from the company that makes your answer chord, absolutely smoking a thoroughbred Italian V8. But the track times weren't even the most humiliating part. The real insult was how effortless the Honda made it look. Remember how driving a Ferrari was a grueling, sweaty workout? You couldn't see out the back, the cabin was a sauna, and you needed thighs like a track cyclist just to push the clutch. The NSX, it had ice-cold air conditioning. It had plush leather seats. The cockpit canopy was actually inspired by an F-16 fighter jet, giving you a perfect 360-degree view. You could take this mid-engine exotic car to buy groceries in stop-and-go traffic, and it wouldn't overheat. But the NSX was not just a one-hit wonder. Honda didn't just lock this technology away in a vault for rich people. No, they took that VTEC magic and started handing it out to the streets like automotive Robin Hoods. They took that screaming, high-revving DNA and put it into their smaller, everyday cars, creating the legendary Type R badge. If you know anything about car culture, you know the absolute terror of pulling up to a stoplight next to a 1990s Honda with a red valve cover. That red engine block is basically the automotive equivalent of a teardrop tattoo. It means it has killed before, and it will kill again. From the B16 to the legendary K20 engine, Honda was giving teenagers a 2.0-litre four-cylinder engine that could rev to an ear-bleeding 9,000 RPM. But if you want to know the ultimate flex, the grand finale of this entire saga, we have to fast forward to 1999. Honda is celebrating its 50th anniversary, and to celebrate, they didn't just throw a party. They built a little sports car called the S2000, powered by the F20C VTEC engine, a 2.0-litre, naturally aspirated engine making 250 horsepower. That is exactly 125 horsepower per litre, without a turbocharger. It officially broke the world record for the highest specific power output of any naturally aspirated piston engine on Earth. Now, I want you to really think about this. The humble, practical, lawnmower-making Honda held this ultimate engineering world record. Guess how long they held it for? A year? 2 years? A full decade. 10 whole years. It wasn't until 2009 that a company finally managed to break Honda's specific output record. And who was it? Who finally stepped up to reclaim the throne? It was Ferrari. With the Ferrari 458 Italia, Maranello finally squeezed out 126.6 horsepower per litre. It took the most prestigious, well-funded supercar manufacturer on the planet 20 years, a complete philosophical redesign, and hundreds of millions of dollars, just to beat the Civic guys by 1.6 horsepower. Ferrari had to go away like a movie villain in a training montage for 2 decades just to finally earn their respect back. And that is the true legacy of VTEC. It wasn't just a clever mechanism inside a piece of metal. It was a complete disruption of the global elite. It proved that in the face of absolute, maniacal engineering brilliance, money and pedigree mean absolutely nothing. A humble car maker from Japan looked at the gods of horsepower, refused to blink, and changed the rules of the game forever. What is your favorite JDM legend of all time? Let me know down in the comments, and I will see you guys in the next one.